If you've heard quite a lot recently about the Green New Deal, but still aren't quite sure what it is, you are alone. After all, it has been trumpeted by its supporters as the way to avoid planetary destruction, and vilified by opponents as a socialist plot to take away your ice cream, so it's bound to be somewhat confusing. In a nutshell, the Green New Deal is a proposal to fight climate change. It would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, cutting them completely in half by 2030. Ocasio-Cortez's version of the non-binding resolution calls for a massive overhaul of the nation's infrastructure, including powering the entire country, I repeat, the entire nation of the United States of America, using renewable resources. This may make you feel hopeful for the future. She's also up against several other immensely powerful US senators, including being repeatedly mocked for her appearance and age on several occasions. She's been criticized for the deal being a 14-page long, abstract proposal with hardly any detail whatsoever. Let's take a look at how it's being covered throughout the news. Now, why exactly is Cortez and her deal so important? Apart from the memes, the story's popularity and relevance really derive from its news values. News values, also known as newsworthiness, are a set of criteria proposed by Gelting and Rouge that determine how much prominence a news story is given by a media outlet and the attention it is given by the audience. And this story almost hits every single one of them. In this case, I'd say the more prominent ones to be elite nations on ambiguity and amplitude. The first news article we'll be looking at is from Fox News. In 2016, Fox News was the main source for 40% of Trump's voters during the election, so it's safe to say that they're on the right of the spectrum. In other words, they tend to go against anything proposed by the Democrats. The title of this article is named House GOP Resolution Blasts Green New Deal as Violating Nation's Bedrock Principles. Straight away, the reader is exposed to the use of incredibly outlandish vocabulary, including blast, dangerous agenda, hoax, and even rooted in fantasy. It certainly fails to provide both sides of the story, and hardly considers the core root of the problem. Its purpose seems solely to convince the readers of conservative values. The article was written by Sam Dorman, a fairly reputable senior reporter who's had his share of scandals and Twitter fights, but one thing I did notice, after looking at his profile, is that throughout his career at Fox, almost every single article has been leaning towards accusing the Democrats of something or the other. My point being that this demonstrates almost only conservative beliefs being put to use when this article was written. After running the image of Cortez used through TinEye, an image search and recognition company with expertise in neural networks, I found that the image used by Dorman was in fact first published a year ago when she was first introduced in Congress. It has no connection whatsoever to the Green New Deal, and therefore undermines the validity of the article. On TrustRevista, this article received an unsurprising 25% quality rating and 11% for context and a negative overall sentiment. It's also worth noting that this article makes effective use of what's called a moral panic, to instill in its readers a natural tendency to disagree with what Cortez is promoting. A moral panic polarizes opinion, in this case the fact that Cortez is a young woman entering politics. The reporters on Fox News consistently refer to her as that girl or young lady, something that is hardly seen when referring to other middle-aged women in Congress. The next article I'll be looking at is from a news outlet named Democracy Now! It's fairly easy to predict where this website is placed on the spectrum simply from its title. You guessed it, it's situated on the far left in the sense that its values are liberal in nature. The article is given the title, "The Green New Deal is exactly the right idea," and goes on to explain why the deal is needed to bring our society to peace. Its sentiment is noticeably positive, overly positive as a matter of fact. The article unfortunately fails to explain exactly how the proposed solutions will matter to the American society, and often repeats one significant idea several times within the same paragraph. Its author is not known, once again making it harder to validate the article. Plugging the article into TrustRevista gives us a quality rating of 65% and an overall positive sentiment of 100%, once again meaning that both sides of the story are not fully covered. Now that we've had our share of both left-wing and right-wing ideals, it's worth taking a look at a politically neutral news agency such as Reuters. The title itself, Democrats Launch 10-Year Plan to Fight Climate Change, insinuates a real sense of retelling and simply provides the reader with a statement regarding current events. As for the language used, it is formal, appropriate, and is in context, consequently receiving a 50% overall sentiment rate on TrustRevista, suggesting that the author's purpose is not to convince, not to persuade, but rather to inform and make aware of both sides of the story. It was written by Valerie Volkovici, a senior editorial correspondent who's been working with Reuters for the last 6 years. I ran a quick Google search on her to find that she's worked for a variety of both left and right-wing news outlets. Through tonight, I found that the photograph was taken by Jonathan Ernst, a world-renowned photographer famous for capturing prominent moments within US politics, and has published the photograph on his personal website as well. It's important to note here that this ultimately reassures the audience in the sense that the photograph won't be used to reinforce any political beliefs. One thing I will point out, however, is their slight use of fallacious reasoning to come to conclusions that may not necessarily be true. For example, their use of parallels to suggest inadequate experience. See the difference? On a final note, it's quite interesting to see how all three of these news outlets utilize the effects of the media triangle to either inform or push a specific agenda, whether that be that climate change is a hoax or that AOC is a young woman, thus suggesting that the representation of the news story in reality has nothing to do with the story, but rather who will engage with it and how it will benefit the news outlet itself.